Morning. Welcome to Tri-State. I'm Tim. I'm one of the pastors here. And listen, those of you that saw me earlier with a scarf, I do love scarves. But my wife was telling me it was looking just a little odd. So we're just going to forget that whole episode happened, okay? We're just going to take a miss on the whole thing. We continue in our city from the book of James. And today it's about transformation, responding to addiction. Now, I already lost a bunch of you just by those words that I said, responding to addiction. Because in your mind, you are so far away from addictions that this will be a nice sermon, and you can talk about how you hope all those other people get it together. But it really doesn't impact you so much. I want to tell you a parable this morning, and the parable I'm not going to tell you is a parable about a guy named Tim Lester who used to have an addiction. I was a bodybuilder. Can you tell? Yeah, that wasn't one of my better addictions, I'm just saying. So, no, but I would tell you a brief parable, but I'm asking the question, or is it a parable? We're going to look in the book of James in just a minute, but did you have that experience before you got into preschool? If little kids would come over to your house, or if you had brothers and sisters, maybe it happened with you and the people that were your brothers and sisters, and they had a toy you wanted, and you were determined to get the toy that you wanted. And so you did things, not that I would know anything about this, you did things like just grabbing it and running and hiding, so when your parents came to kind of find out what would happen, the only one is the kid that's sitting there yelling and screaming. Or, this was my personal favorite, I would steal what I took, and then I would slap myself in the face so it would look like one of my brothers had hit me. And then when my mom and dad came in, you know how that works? You see, we want what we want, right? I mean, when we're not connected to God, when we're not interacting with Him, the truth is we want what we want. Now, my brother Larry, my mom actually, when I can remember when I was 6 years old, my mom came to me. I walked in on my mother, and she was bawling, and she was convinced that my brother Larry was not going to live past his 18th birthday. My brother Larry had cross eyes, and so he wore glasses right as he was turning 2 for his whole life. And Larry just had that look in his eye that you could tell when he was walking up and down the halls of the church, something bad is going to happen today. I mean, he just loved getting into stuff and getting into trouble, and his ability to grab hold of what he wanted. And Mom would do she would do the dutiful conversation. You really disappointed me. Dad would lay hands on him. And you would think it was all going to be okay, but I'm telling you, give him 5 minutes and he could find something else. And the whole of his life was about getting his way. There were two kinds of people in the world, those that were going to do what he wanted his way, and those that did it his way, and those that were going to do it his way. It was just the way Larry did life. And honestly, these boys that are up on there, but the truth is that doesn't change a whole lot. It has occurred to me that along the way, you'd think that we would grow up in this whole idea of, I'm going to have what I want, when I want, and how I want it. And I'm going to have my needs met. But the truth is, there's a lot of little kids that spend a lot of time with their hands over their ears because mom and daddy have got to have it their way and they can't get it resolved. Now, I'm not picking on you if a parent. I just want you to see the reality is, it is very possible for all of us to still act like a bunch of preschoolers, right? It is true. Well, it just so happens that I have the luxury of being right according to the scriptures. In the book of James 1-3 says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? This is the NIV version. You want something, but you don't get it. You kill and covet, but you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and fight, and you do not have because you do not ask God. And when you do ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your own pleasures. Anyone, he goes on a little bit later on in verse 4, anyone who chooses to be a friend of God, a friend of the world, then becomes an enemy of God. And so I want you to think about this with me. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 1 and verse 3, this beautiful concept that we've talked about before is that Jesus Christ holds the entire universe together with the single word of his power. I always say I want to know what the word is. But whatever the word is, he's holding the entire universe together. So just looking at our little man up here, the truth is Christ literally holds together believers and unbelievers alike. I'm not saying unbelievers have Christ within. I'm just saying he's holding them together just the way as you and I. And the problem is, when we invite anything as a believer or as an unbeliever, when we invite some other way in that is anti-Christ, it acts like a solvent in my life, and I start coming undone. Now, if you don't believe me, those of you that are married, go home and tell your wife she's ugly, or that she needs to do a little of this or do a little of that. Or you wives, tell your husbands that you just wish they'd grow up and mean it. And see how that goes for you. You see, things will start to come undone. And I could give you many more reasons. But as we move along, as you look at the book of James, so here's what James says, what happens is that when I invite this other way in, I start coming undone. The first thing James says that happens is I have desires, and those desires invite another way in. Now, this other way in, he quickly begins to describe as you covet what your neighbor wants or has, and you try to kill to get what you want. All of you say, well, phew, man, I'm good on that one because I haven't killed anybody this week. But the truth is we kill a lot of other things. All of you know more to do than you've been doing, right? And I'm not trying to make another list for you, but the truth is those things within you that you know are the things that Christ would call you to, you kill that stuff in you because you want what you want when you want it, right? When you're not following Christ, that's what you do. And so you kill the internal things in you, even the promptings of God's Spirit if you're a Christ follower. And so you kill that. You kill other people's ability to have what they want because, by the way, what you want is more important than everybody else. My pain, my desire for pleasure, my getting what I want to feel like I'm somebody or that I'm lovable and acceptable, or at least that it gets rid of the pain, comes before you. When I'm in that mode, that's where I go on. So I kill other people's opportunity to even have that. But then it goes on as you move along the process. So he has desires. We kill and covet. And then the third thing is we start coming undone. Well, how do I know that? According to the book of James, he says, so you're not getting your needs met. You start killing off all the desires to do the right thing. And then you start fighting with other people because they're not particularly happy that you've become the center of the universe. You know, I'm the king of my universe, and you are all my subjects, and you are all supposed to tell me what I want to hear. You're supposed to do what I want because, see, the center of my life is comfort. And when I go into that mode, people have a tendency to not like that very much. They have this sense that, wait, maybe I want to be the king of the universe. And so what happens is they start quarreling and fighting. Now, I want to be very clear to you. If you're here and you haven't decided what you're going to do with Jesus yet, and you're still looking at this whole, who is Jesus and what do I do with him? All the stuff that I'm talking about this morning was written to Christians, to believers who were completely missing it. They were completely out of whack. So don't think you came to church this morning and they figured out all the people who didn't follow Christ and just beat us half to death. This is not where we're going. This first comes to the body of Christ, right, church? Yes, that's right. So he goes along, so he says, we start to come undone. Now, let me ask you, how many of you, and I'm not going to do a lot of this today, how many of you, if you would raise your hand, have ever found yourself in a fight with somebody, not necessarily one of these, but a word fight, and you're quarreling with them, and you're going, could I have a do-over on this? Because this is not enjoyable. Yeah. And you're even surprised at just how nuclear you can go Whether you're having an inward explosion or an outward explosion, you find yourself internally, you are coming undone. But it doesn't stop there, according to James, because he says, newsflash, you could have the things that you need. You could have that desire for love and acceptance and the pain that you're feeling. You could actually have the needs of your heart and your soul, your mind, your will and emotions, all of that. You could have that met, but guess what? You don't ask God. You just don't ask. Do you know why you don't ask? Because you want what you want your way. But then he goes on to say one more thing. He says, not only do you not ask God, sometimes it occurs to you to ask God for something, but you ask selfishly. And when you ask selfishly, you go spend it on yourself. Yeah, that really goes over well in the household. That goes over well at work, that all that matters at work is you. And so you see, I become more and more and more undone. And then finally this, James in a crescendo says, look, you're choosing the world, and if you're choosing the world, you're being an enemy of God. If you're an enemy of God, you're not doing anything in that relationship, that interaction, that makes it possible for you to experience the benefit both in this life and in the life to come from being in a relationship with the living creator of the universe. One friend of mine said it's like this. I have... do you remember the genie movie where the Aladdin, the genie? Did you see the part? Do you remember the part where he said, they were talking about what it was like to be a genie, and he says, ultimate power, little bitty living spaces. Well, that's kind of what it is with Jesus. Ultimate power, creator of the universe, and he is chosen for anyone who will invite him in to come and live inside them and do for them what they would never be able to do for themselves. And to actually give them back a sense of control and well-being and stability and a sense of wholeness that they could not have experienced or cannot experience apart from him. But if I choose the world, I make myself an enemy of God, and so I get none of that benefit. So, well, tell me, what in the world does this have with addiction? Well, I'm getting there, so just hang on. This is addiction. The truth is one of the problems as we start to talk about the issues of addiction is that we look at those people out there that have got a heroin addiction or the whatever addiction, or they're really hooked on prescription drugs. And we look at them, and I mean, let's get real. Some of us have got a clue that maybe not everybody that's ever done that looks like they just, slept on the side of the street last night. But the truth is we kind of think it's them, the other people, and we don't do that stuff. Watch my lips. The only difference between them and you is they chose an addiction that physiologically impairs them as well. And it's physiologically harder to break than the fact that you go in and use quarreling and whatever all of your addictions might be. And the list could go on. It could be food. It could be control. It could be, and those kinds of things like that. So I want you to be clear that the reason we can talk about addictions in a church and have any kind of credibility at all is all of you and me are just like them. We have just a different thing we use. Let me give you a definition. I've said this dozens of times here. An addiction falls into the category what the Bible calls an idol or a way to cope with life. It's a way we get rid of pain and get some pleasure, to have some internal sense of feeling loved and accepted. And so an idol is anything I run to under pressure other than the Lord. I'm going to repeat because some of you need to hear this. An idol is anything you run to under pressure other than the Lord. So for some of you, yeah, that means cars and making a bunch of money and all that kind of stuff. For some of you, yes, that means drugs, and secretly nobody knows that you're using that. For some of you, it's controlling everybody and you're the big bully in your household. For some of you, excuse me, it's you're in your own mind all the time. If you're a student, you guys take your pick. It's distracting yourself with dozens of things in this world. For some of you, it's just withdrawing from the world. For some of you, it's depression. And again, don't read too much into that. But I tell you, there's a way I can be depressed, and the nice thing about it is everybody serves me. I get a lot of mileage out of it. All I want you to see is you are them. And so the reason you ought to give attention to what we're saying is James says this whole thing happens to all of us. You just need to get a clue that just because yours doesn't look as bad as mine, this is not the whole nice little discussion, you know, all sin is sin. I just want to throw up. Could we just quit saying that? Could we please just admit that we're caught in the same trap everybody else is when we're moving the way that James is talking about here? But I do want to suggest to you, so we're all in this together, and if you find yourself in that little trap, you're just as addicted to somebody else. But I do want to talk to you briefly about addiction, because, see, I want you to see how bad this can get, how far it can go. In my own family, and I'm not going to go into the details because I got a lot of people in my family, the issue of addiction relative to drugs has hit my own family. For the individuals involved with this, it started with pot in our situation. It moved to misuse of prescription drugs, and then cocaine and alcohol, and then alcohol to come off the cocaine. And now it's been over 15 years. And the amount of hurt and pain and destruction that's happened in my family as a result of that is devastating. So first of all, you need to remember this is you. It just may not be you using drugs, right? Everybody got that, right? But the second thing is, it's you in the sense of it happened to me, and has happened in my family. But additionally, it's happening in our family, in the tri-state family. Let me just name a few of the things. You would be shocked to find out about alcohol abuse in our body. You would probably be shocked the creative ways people have found to abuse meds, prescription meds that are a part of our body here. The secret pacts that have been made among people and I'm not going to tell you anybody's name, so don't anybody get uncomfortable. But the secret pacts that are made, and see what we do, if we deny that it's happening, we don't have to deal with it anymore. We just pretend like it doesn't exist. And that's not some general thing. I could give names to every single one of these issues, not by way of criticism. I want you to get this. This is not some little issue that's somewhere else. It's here, right here in this body. In the community of our family, through June of 2017, there were 159 heroin-related overdoses and at least 16 fatalities in the county. In June alone, there were over 50 overdoses and at least 6 fatalities. This spike was due in part to painkillers that are mixed with heroin. And across Maryland, even the schools are stocking supplies of Narcan. And it's the drug administered to people who have done a drug overdose. So what's the point? Well, there's lots of them, but here's a big one for right now. I can't empathize unless I recognize that I'm in the same boat, just got a different idol, right? Right? If I can't empathize that, I'll always see it as them and their problem because I don't see that I have my own. I can't offer hope that I haven't experienced by turning to the creator of the universe to deal with my own stuff. I can't be heard if I won't be able to be heard by them if I won't hear it for myself. I can't offer a solution I won't try, and I can't insist that Christ is the way when I keep inviting another way in for myself. Can you imagine what it would be like talking to somebody that has this moment of clarity that's been involved with drugs? And you're looking at them and saying, listen, Jesus isn't the answer. You know what I would do if I saw that you kept inviting another way into your family and your life, and you were trying to tell me Jesus is the answer for my addiction? I tell you to take a long walk on a short pier. Because you don't get the reality. You don't buy what you sow. Deal with your own stuff today, or we'll never deal with addiction here in Hagerstown, Maryland, and Washington County. James says, it goes on to say, but he gives us more grace. Submit yourselves to God. Resist the devil. Come near to God. Wash your hands and purify your hearts. Grieve and mourn and wail. Humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up. I want to just briefly tell you this. There's nothing real complicated about how you deal with your own stuff. Just in case I was unclear, here's what dealing with your own stuff looks like in everyday terms and practical. If as a result of what I'm communicating to you today, and you see yourself in that cyclical thing that James described, that you find that you have invited another way in, you've completely blown any effort that you involved yourself with this morning in coming. If you fail to simply participate with Christ in what James says, God is looking for ways to move you out of that thing you're doing. But he says, first of all, submit to me, submit to God. What's submit mean? It means you go to God and say, God, this is where I'm at. I am messed up. This thing is happening in my life. And it may just be in relationship to where you are with your parents. It may just be in relationship with your mate or where you work, but you recognize that you've been inviting another way in. And we'll talk about the another way in a little while. But then again, go near to him. He knows all the stuff you're doing. He knows you're caught in a trap. And oh, by the way, he knows you're thinking about all the people that do drug addiction and thinking you're better than they are. Wash your hands. Admit, say, I don't want any of that anymore. Grieve over the things of the sin that you've done. Oh, by side note, and students, I'll talk to you a little bit more about this, but adults do it all the time. I cannot believe the level of, if you do something wrong, and it hurts people, and it hurts yourself, everybody just says, well, you know, we can't judge. You know, we don't want to interfere in somebody's life. You do what you want to do, and I do what I want to do. What universe does that ever turn out well in? I'm just telling you, it doesn't work. There is a responsibility that I have for you and to care about you. And finally, he just says, humble yourself before the Lord, and watch this. He will lift you up. Okay, you know what he will lift you up means? It means he'll lift you up. It means he will actually engage with you and take you to the place where you are not right now. But it requires for you to engage him. Well, moving on, so that was the parable that really wasn't a parable. There's also a problem, and the problem's endurance, and we'll just hit this quickly because it's straightforward. In James chapter 5, verse 7 to 9, be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming, and see how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and the spring. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord is near. Here's the problem with enduring suffering. If I've decided that the goal of my life is to make me be comfortable, anybody that comes into my life or that I have to deal with or any circumstance that makes me feel uncomfortable, I have to jettison them out. There's one problem. Here's another problem. I want what I want, but I also want what I want right now. And so that sort of kind of does away with the patience and suffering thing. In other words, I want all the good stuff, but I don't want to have to deal with the realities of the issues, that there's some hard things that have to come before it comes. James just says it like this, that there's this image of a farmer, and he puts stuff in the ground and he has to wait, and the storms come and it doesn't look like anything's happening, and you know, we're not really an agricultural society, even around here, not so much anymore. We have that. But he says it takes a lot, about, 9 months? See, I'm not a farmer, so I'm a city boy. So it takes a while for them things to pop up out of the ground. That's all I'm saying. And you got to wait for that. And by the way, there's a lot of annoying work you have to do before you see anything come out of the ground. And so, of course, the problem in enduring and suffering is I want what I want now. And there's two problems, as I see, relative to this whole issue of addiction in our own lives and other people's lives, particularly when I've invited another way in. The first problem is this: I'm not done with my own way. I want what I want, and I want my desires fixed my way. Well, if that's my approach and I've decided that I'm now functioning as an enemy of God, you may say, well, I'm not an enemy of God. Anytime I invite another way in but Christ's way, I'm an enemy of God. Now, he doesn't forsake me, because he says, I'm going to keep passing out grace to you. That means I'm going to help. But you may not like the way the help comes. Because if you don't think his way is the way, he's more than happy to instruct you about why your way doesn't work. So that's the first problem is I just want what I want. And so to say to endure suffering is a problem. But the second thing in relationship to other people is I don't want to put up with other people's stupidity. They deserve what they get because of their stupidity. And it's going to cost me too much if I have to deal with them because of their stupidity. See the key word here, stupidity. Did you get that? But my point is, in my arrogance, since I don't see that they and I are the same, that we still get caught in the same trap, and I'm not engaging the creator of the universe, here's what happens. I'm thinking they're an inconvenience to me when I have to go deal with your stupidity. Now, if you don't believe this, kids, don't raise your hands. How many of you, as a student, have ever thought, good night, I wish my mama would just get her stuff together? What was my dad thinking? Why do I have to put up with all this? And on and on and on. How many of you, perhaps in a much more real way in terms of the addiction relative to drugs, have had to deal with somebody, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. How many of you have had consequences come to you in your life because someone was struggling with the addiction of some kind of drug-related thing? Unless you think you're going to embarrass somebody, just put your hand up. I'm not asking you to tattle. Put them up right quick. I just want to. Okay, we're talking about a third of the people actually raised their hand. Now, here's what I want you to see. If you've lived through that for a little bit, you don't have any desire to go start signing up for that again. Because you see, the center of my life is me. And I want my things my way, and I don't want to do the patient endurance. But with the call for dealing with endurance and suffering, there comes a provision. And finally, this. God has a plan. In James chapter 5, verse 13, he says, is any one of you in trouble? Let him pray. If he's happy, let him sing songs of praise. If anybody of you is sick, call the elders of the church to pray over them. And we'll skip on over to James 5:15b. He says, if they've sinned, they will be forgiven. Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective. That's powerful. My brothers and sisters, if one of you should wander from the truth and someone should bring that person back, remember this: whoever turns a sinner from the error of their ways will save them from death and will cover a multitude of sins. I'm going to spend the rest of these last few minutes together talking to you what we can do about addictions. So listen, this is the good stuff. You could just listen to this at the end of the sermon. You wouldn't have to listen to all this stuff. 2 words: recognize and engage. James says it very simply. If you're in trouble, pray to God and ask him for help. Because you remember he said, you don't receive what you need because you don't ask God. And then when you do ask God, you ask selfishly. Again, no one cares what you have to say about Jesus being the answer if they do not observe the reality that you buy that he's very much engaged in your life. I'm not going to say who I posted it to, but I just posted, and I don't do a lot of posting. I just posted something on somebody's Facebook that sent me a post that went through another post, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I just had to start talking about Jesus. And when I got done, it occurred to me that maybe I'd been politically incorrect. I'd used some words and so on. And at the end, I just said, I apologize to anybody that I broke the rule with, that I don't even know existed. But this is what you have to hear. Well, I'll just tell you, it was about my grandson. And I said, I really don't care what you think anymore about whether or not I was too long or too short or too spiritual or too preachy. What I care about is that my grandson comes to understand that in my stupidity, Jesus Christ transformed my life. In the middle of my sin and my brokenness and all the things I've got wrong, there's one man on this planet that has empowered me to be a real man, to be independent, as I've been dependent on him. And because of that, my life has been transformed, and I want my grandson to know forever that that's my blessing for him, that he know the real and living Jesus that overcomes all the hurt. You see what I'm saying? Now, I'm not asking you to go mimic and start posting stuff. Trust me, you don't want to do what I did. What I'm saying is there is a reality that I'll never have a voice with people who are hurting in the area of drug addiction because they cannot believe that we even buy this stuff, that Jesus is in it and he is a great healer of people. If you've got a reason for joy, he says sing. In other words, throw a party. If you are sick, then call and ask for the elders to pray. And I wish I had time to go into all that. But the whole idea is that that I would look out and I would look and ask for help from these men and believing that Christ would use them to bring about healing. Fourth, recognize your own need and then confess your sins to each other. And finally he says this, others need you, so engage those who are caught in the various addictions. So what do? Well, the first thing we do is engage. If we're dealing with addictions, we engage for ourselves, and then we engage in terms of in any way we can to address the issue of addictions in our life. And here's the first way is open up your eyes. Now, this is a picture of a place. You can go down to the police station. And so the reality of physical drugs that are out there right now, you can go down to the police station and take in your prescription drugs that are in your cabinet you're not using anymore. I want to encourage you to do so. There's no questions asked. Why? Because one of the ways students are getting hooked on prescription meds is because when they're hurting from the pain of life, when they've been rejected, when they're feeling not loved and not rejected, when they've had crazy things happen and things perpetrated upon them, they go in mom and dad's closet and get the prescription drugs. Now, before you think your kids would never do that, get a real life. The epidemic would not be what it was if it didn't happen that way. But you can turn those things in. So that's what you can do in this community. But open up your eyes to what's actually happening. Yes, in your family, but in our community, in my family, open up your eyes and see first your own stuff and then what's happening around you. Secondly, pray that their eyes will be open. The book of Ephesians has one of the most amazing prayers. And he literally, Paul gets on his knees and he starts praying. He says, God, I pray their eyes will be open. Have you ever talked to anybody that's caught in an addiction? And I'm not just talking about drug addiction or alcohol addiction. You ever talked to anybody that's just decided they're going to be addicted to being mad all the time? I don't care what they talk to you about, it's all negative. They've just decided they're going to be mad. How much do they want to hear you look at them and say, you know, you're addicted to being mad? Now, maybe you wouldn't say it just like that. You're liable to get smacked. What I want you to see is that the living God of the universe has the ability to give people aha moments. Risk being in conflict. If you think you want to start investing in the lives of people who are struck with addictions, assuming you've actually are continually inviting Christ to deal with your own, you're going to have to risk being in conflict. They're not going to be all that happy that you showed up to share with them about their addictions. Plan on being falsely accused. I've had this with people who are not involved in drugs and people that are involved in drugs and whatever their addiction is. And one of the common things I hear is you're too insensitive, you're judging, you're not supposed to judge people. I can't believe it. This is just the way the church is. Christians are so condescending. Well, you know, while there are people who are condescending that are believers, a lot of time you get accused of that when you're not doing it. Here's another thing. Do the hard work of intervention. You see the guy up on the right? Or gal, and no offense, I just couldn't tell by just looking at the picture. You know what this picture's connected to? It's connected to a site that basically promotes the idea of you do what you're going to do and I'll do what I'm going to do and let's just all leave each other alone and, you know, you live your life. I want everyone in here to hear this. If you are a Christ follower, there's nothing in the scripture that relinquishes you from not speaking up with people, at least the people who are your brothers and sisters in Christ. As a matter of fact, it does the exact opposite. You're supposed to get in their face. And I don't mean in a condescending way, but you're supposed to care enough to say what is true to them. Now, here's the truth. I know for a fact there are students, and there's a lot of students that are part of it, so I'm not necessarily specifically talking about the ones sitting in front of me right now. There's a lot of students in this body right now that are in dark, dark places. And I don't just mean with the drugs. There are students in this place that are slowly withdrawing. They're here, but they're just kind of withdrawing, and they're making God their enemy, and they're moving into their own way, and they're inviting another way in. If you're here this morning and you've recognized that, any of you students that are right here, and you're sitting on your backside and not saying something to them about it, stop. God has given you this amazing privilege to care about the people that are around you. Because the truth is, any one of us could fall into a place like that, right? Couldn't we? Excuse me. So be willing not to just throw up your hands, but to be willing to do the hard interventions. And this even gets harder as drugs are involved with this whole thing, because the truth is it might mean that you're going to do a surprise meeting with them to where some very, very hard things are challenged towards them. And they're put in situations where they have to make some hard choices. Do you know that sometimes people have to quit helping people that are involved in this process? You have to do some very hard things, and they're going to call you everything but what you want them to be calling you. And when they're to that breaking point, particularly the drugs, there's a great place here in Hagerstown, Maryland. It's called Brooks House, and it's actually for young ladies trying to create a loving community where they can detox and get on the right path relative to drugs-related kinds of things. But again, there's a beginning place, and the beginning place is for you to engage them, knowing full well the one creator of the universe that can come inside them and do what he's done for you, and it's to bring you out of your addictions. Finally, get out of God's way and show up when they wake up. Show up when they wake up. The truth is you may have some broken relationships if you choose to engage in the addictions of people, whether it's the addictions that don't have to do with drugs or the ones that don't. But it is a hard, messy path. There's going to be carnage along the way. But this storm is a-coming. And as this storm is a-coming, I want to encourage you something from the Scriptures. In Matthew chapter 17, verses 13 and 14. Here's what the Scriptures teach. That there's a wide road that leads to death, a narrow road that leads to life. Now, I want you to look on the diagrams, because I want this forever seared in your brain. There are two kinds of people on the wide road that leads to death, because you see, there's not just death at hell, thinking about long term, but there's a death that people live on this earth all the time. It's hell on earth. And there's both believers and unbelievers on that wide road. And they're headed to some dark places. But I want to encourage you about something. It's not all on you. The God of this universe creates a funnel, metaphorically speaking, because he says in his mercy and compassion, which what James was saying, he says, I love you so much, I'm going to create an environment that gives you a chance to go on the narrow road. And so he puts a lot of people's activities in there. God adds his activities in there. He invites Satan in to tempt the person. He uses their own failure in their life. And then guess who else goes in there? You get to go in the funnel with them. And when you're in the funnel with somebody that's completely committed to inviting another way into their life, everything's swirling like this. And there is nothing but a lot of bumping and banging. And at the end of that thing, they come out down to the funnel, and suddenly they start to recognize, maybe my way is not the way. And on that day, you'll be on the narrow road. And I want you waiting for them to come out of the funnel. Because if you're not, then they come out and they're so incredibly discouraged that nobody shows up. The truth is if we want to have an impact relative to addictions in people's lives, from the quote-unquote smallest addiction to heroin addiction, we have to show up. I understand this is a very complex issue, but the truth is we have to be willing to show up and even be there as people are banging through the funnel, holding on for dear life, saying, I will not let go. And then when you show up, to say, let me introduce you to the one man that can make it possible for you to kick any habit. Amen? Amen. Amen.